Ever wondered what software engineers do? This conversation is for you. We have Gabe, who is a software engineer at Lockheed Martin. He's going to talk about what a typical workday looks like, the technologies he uses, common misconceptions about the profession, and what aspiring software engineers should know before entering the field. Gabe, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So let's get right to it. So, what does a typical day look like for you as a software engineer? I'm really curious about how you divide your time between maybe coding, meetings, debugging, documentation, and all the various moving parts. Tell us a little bit about it.
Right. So I would say my typical day pretty much starts with a recap of what I did the day prior. So kind of how it works, we're every 2 or so weeks, or honestly throughout the weeks, we're given certain tasks. And once you do start on a task, you kind of just either you do it to completion, or if you're given multiple tasks, maybe you work on each of them concurrently. But when I walk into the office in the morning, I'll kind of sit down and read my notes because I like to write little notes for myself at the end of the workday. So I have something to read the following day. And I'll look at where I left off, go through my notes, maybe go through my email, whatever I wrote down or typed out, and see what I need to start on for that day, depending on where I left off the day before. So nowadays, that's mainly, I would say, kind of the bulk of what I do now is investigation. So let's say there's a software defect in a specific service or product that we offer. So I will be given the problem report for this is just a typical write up of what's wrong, and what part of our product is broken. Then I will actually do the investigation. So that would mean recreating the issue, turning on our developer logs, kind of going through those logs to see if I can pinpoint the exact, maybe timestamp or area in the code where the problem occurred. I would then hopefully come up with a software implementation to fix this defect, and then I'll kind of submit that write up in a follow up report to kind of close out the original problem report. And then, of course, if it's approved, I'll be given the go ahead to actually implement the software fix for the defect.
Wow. So you're primarily working on investigations and digging in to figure out what the issue is, what the problem is. So when you were talking about that, I was wondering, so how many problems are you typically solving a day? Do you find that one problem might take the entire day, or is it like you have a queue and you need to get through like 4 or 5 problems in one day, you need to hit this quota? How does that work?
Yeah, like you mentioned, sometimes a problem could take the entire day. Sometimes it could take 3 weeks.
Wow.
It's large. Yeah, it can be brutal sometimes. It's largely dependent on what's broken and I guess the expertise of all of the engineers who are capable of fixing that problem. Because sometimes we get issues where it's literally only one person who really knows what's going on, and you have to just heavily rely on that person, gain as much background context and legacy knowledge as possible from them before you actually go and tackle the issue yourself. Or sometimes it is a queue where you're given maybe 3 or 4 problem reports and you're expected to have all of them investigated by the end of next week or maybe even the end of this week, etc.
And obviously, if you don't get to the end of the investigation, you probably provide some documentation or a follow up about it, right? Letting them know,
Yeah, I
what.
always try to communicate as much as possible. If I'm not going to finish something by the deadline, I'll reach out to we call them baseline delivery leads, which is kind of like the program lead. He's basically the team lead for that specific, let's say, project. But I'll always reach out to them and I'll tell them, hey, I'm working on these 3 problem reports. 2 of them are going to finish, but that third one is taking up more time because of XYZ. Are you willing to give me more time, more funding, etc., so I can actually complete it? And then I'll go from their response.
Nice. So, in addition to those investigations, are you having to do meetings in between? Are you meeting with clients or meeting with your team or anything like that?
Luckily, I don't have a lot of meetings, so I'm really thankful for. But we do daily sprint stand up. So we're an agile company, so we follow the agile methodology where we have daily meetings where we talked about what we accomplished yesterday, any blockers that we may have had, and then we also speak on what we're going to accomplish this the current day. And we do that daily. And then sometimes we'll be thrown into maybe design study meetings where, for example, like right now, we're trying to introduce a new capability to our existing software products. So there are a lot of design study meetings where a bunch of engineers from different teams come together and we kind of just brainstorm how are we going to bring this huge capability that the customer wants into our already existing code base. Um, and as for me, I don't really meet up with clients. However, every now and then I will meet with some of the sailors because we mainly get contracted work from the U.S. Navy. So you'll actually see sailors from either from the U.S. Navy or even foreign Navy officers. They'll come and speak with us if we're working on a contract for them.
Nice. So it seems like, I mean, there's lots of work to do, lots of moving pieces, especially with those investigations. So I'm wondering, what's some of the programming languages or the tools or technologies, maybe even the use of AI in your role?
So I would say the four biggest things you absolutely need to know if you're going to work at Lockheed Martin or really any tech company, any organization like that is Linux for sure. Linux, hands down, is one of the most important things you need to know. Um, you definitely need to know C++, Java, or really any object-oriented programming because we rely on that heavily at my job. And then you also need to know Git as well for variation management or really just any version controlling tool. Um, and then as for I don't really use it at all in my job. I work under classified I work in a classified environment basically. So we have very limited access to AI in the first place. And then there's very few use cases where you can actually use a large language model or a chatbot feature to help you with your job. But on the unclassified side, Lockheed Martin actually has their own artificial intelligence kind of lab where they developed this tool where it can help you, let's say, like write up a document for a meeting that you have to do, maybe a presentation, and it will help you develop the slides. Or if you have Lockheed Martin specific questions, like I don't know, let's say you wanted to know, maybe you wanted to know a question about the specific Lockheed Martin AI lab, and like maybe what are the technologies that they produce? The AI tool will actually be able to help you answer a question like that.
Nice. Well, so you mentioned all these tools. So if somebody doesn't have the knowledge or the skills of these tools already, do you think that they're doomed? There's no point in them applying? What if they have like two of them, but not the other one? Is there anything that they can do to still, make themselves competitive?
I would say yes.
Okay,
Honestly,
good.
the most important, but the most important thing that you can have, and this goes for any job anywhere, is being a good problem solver. Even if you don't know Linux, even if you don't know any object-oriented programming languages, or you're not familiar with any version control tool, as long as you are able to adapt and you are able to learn on the fly, you can really work in any environment. In fact, one of our best engineers actually has a background in finance, so totally unrelated from software and coding and computer science, but he ended up being literally one of our most capable and knowledgeable engineers.
Nice. Gabe, you know what I'm thinking about when you're saying, maybe you don't have these skills, but you can still apply and, transition your skills. They got that thing called applicant tracking system, ATS, and they say that a lot of the companies
True.
use it. So you're applying, you don't have the resume doesn't have C++. There's nothing in there that says Java. There's nothing in there that says Linux, but then you're like problem solving. Do you think, and I'm wondering, I'm thinking, I'm like, maybe if you don't have those in your resume, maybe it would never get to the hiring manager? I wonder. Or do you think if that person could connect maybe with a recruiter, maybe through a networking event or maybe a career fair, and pitch themselves during that event, and do you think that would be an effective way to get some type of interview? Because I'm not sure if Lockheed Martin's using ATS, or really focusing on those skills in folks' resume before they would get an interview.
You know what, Amen? That's actually a great point. A lot of companies, and I think Lockheed Martin included, actually, are using these applicant tracking systems. So without a lot of the relevant keywords in your resume or in your application, you might never proceed to the actual human screening portion of the hiring process. So in that case, it's like you mentioned, really lean heavy into those job fairs. In fact, the how I got my job in the first place was actually at a job fair too. It was the BEA convention, the BEA STEM fair, and that's usually held in Baltimore, where I spoke directly to a hiring manager. Although prior to the convention, I did upload my resume into their portal, and then I got selected for an interview. But probably the best way to work with these ATS tools would be don't lie on your resume, of course, but really highlight any relevant skills that you have that also may relate to kind of the qualifications needed in the job description. And then if you are able to move on to the actual interview process or any type of like step where you are able to speak with a person, really lean heavy on the fact that you are adaptable, you're malleable, and you have very strong problem solving abilities.
I like that. Thanks, Gabe. Thanks so much for clearing that up, because I know
Of course.
it's tough out here. It's crazy out here. And if anybody ever wants to know if a company is using some type of applicant tracking system, or what that tracking system might be, a lot of times if you find the job description and you press apply and you look at the link at the top, you might see something like workday might be mentioned. You might see for Lockheed Martin, theirs is called Brass Ring, BRASSRING. When I just went to a random job and pressed apply, I saw that in the link, but that doesn't mean that they're filtering people out by their skills, or it doesn't mean all those kind of things, but it just tells you that's the tool that they're using. They might be using it for various different things, but that's one way that you can find that information. Now, Gabe, there's all sorts of stuff that software engineers do. What do you think is a big misconception about the field or the role that people think, but it's just not really the reality when you're, in that role?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that we're just sitting at our chair coding all day. Honestly, and I think this is true across the entire industry, most software engineers or developers don't actually spend a whole lot of time coding. Like I mentioned in the prior question, we actually spent a lot of time doing investigations. If there's a defect, if there's a bug, some weird glitch anywhere in your products, usually you're going to be sent out to recreate the issue, look at logs, do a lot of testing. You're going to be investigating, and you're also going to be doing a lot of reading and writing of documents. You're going to spend a lot of time leaning on other coworkers. You're going to be collaborating with them. You're going to be asking questions. You're going to be in meetings sometimes. It's a lot of other work surrounding the actual software engineering aspect.
So, with all the additional work and in addition to coding, what do you find that is maybe 10% coding, 20% coding? Like, what do you think is since it might not be primarily the focus. So I'm wondering about that, especially with, like you said, like doing investigations.
I would say, yeah, roughly 10% of the time that you're coding.
Wow.
If, yeah, it's not a big percentage, honestly. But of course, when you actually do start coding, sometimes you'll go on a pretty big tangent, and you might end up spending multiple days, if not multiple weeks, trying to come up with your software implementation. But on a typical week, a lot of your time is spent almost researching even. You want because there are a lot of legacy systems, there are a lot of different teams, there are a lot of different tools, and even just our code base in general, it's absolutely ginormous. I believe it's multiple millions of lines of code. So combing through all of that just takes a lot of effort, a lot of time. So you're going to be doing a lot of researching, a lot of investigating, a lot of write-ups. You're going to be talking to more senior engineers who possess a certain um, niche knowledge that you're going to need to finish your tasking. It's a lot of other work besides actually sitting there and coding out a fix.
Awesome. Well, I think that's really helpful for folks who might want to get into being a software engineer, maybe after they graduate. Is there any other tips or advice or anything that you think folks should know if they're graduating soon, or maybe they've already graduated and they're just looking to get into this field? What would you say that they start doing now to best prepare themselves?
I would say, and especially in this current job market, really lean into those in-person job fairs, in-person networking events where you're really able to talk to a person, a hiring manager, an interviewer, and really sell yourself, really sell your skills, and highlight where you may have a lack of experience, you more than make up for it in all of these other areas. And then, of course, brush up on as much of your computer science, like foundational knowledge as possible. No matter what level you get to in your software engineering or software, career, you're always going to need the fundamental knowledge. Uh, Basically, every kind of any advanced system that you're going to work on or any very like complex topic that you're going to touch is always going to be made easier if you possess the skills that you kind of learn early on in your career or even back in school.
Well, that's really helpful, Gabe. I really appreciate you sharing all those tips. Thank you so much.
Of course.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Hopefully, you've gotten a lot from our conversation. So, our goal is to share stories that build clarity, confidence, and connection for your next job, whether that's an internship, a full time role, or another opportunity. We'll be back soon with more conversations to help you become next job ready. So, until next time, I'm your host, Amen, signing off.